I was 9 years old when my parents told me I was dying. They shaved my head, dressed me in hospital gowns, and paraded me in front of strangers for donations. The world thought they were saving my life, but the truth was far darker than anyone could imagine. Before continue, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. I used to think childhood was supposed to be about playgrounds, scraped knees, and learning how to ride a bike. But mine was about hospitals I never needed to be in, medical terms I barely understood, and a constant fear of saying the wrong thing. I was 9 years old when my parents told me I had cancer. At first, I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel anything, really, just confused. I wasn't in pain, I wasn't coughing up blood, I wasn't weak. But my parents sat me down at the kitchen table, their faces serious, and told me I was sick. Very sick. They said I needed to start treatment right away, that I couldn't tell anyone about it unless they approved. I didn't understand what that meant, but they spoke with such gravity that I nodded and obeyed. The next day, everything changed. My mom shaved my head in the bathroom. The buzzing sound of the clippers was the first time I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. She told me it was because the medicine I would take would make my hair fall out anyway, so this was just preparing me. I looked at my reflection afterward, my small face looked older somehow, my wide eyes sharper, almost afraid. Then came the hospital visit. But these weren't real checkups. We didn't go to the big city hospital I'd seen on TV. Instead, we went to small clinics, the kind where the doctor was a family friend who owed my parents favors. They would scribble notes on paper, nod a lot, and give me empty pill bottles to take home. I didn't know it then, but every visit was part of a bigger plan, one I couldn't yet see. About a week later, I found myself in a crowded hall filled with people I didn't know. My mom held my hand tightly, my dad kept telling me to look tired, to keep my shoulders slumped, to smile only a little when people talked to me. Banners with my face on them hung across the walls, with words like, "Help Ryan fight cancer," printed in big bold letters. I didn't know what fundraising was, but I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Some smiled kindly, others looked like they were about to cry. An older woman came up to me and held my face in her hand. Her palms were warm, trembling a little. She told me I was brave, and pressed an envelope into my mom's hand. I didn't understand why she was crying. I didn't understand why everyone seemed so sad for me, when I didn't feel sick at all. That night, back at home, I heard my parents in the kitchen. They were laughing, not a relieved laugh, but a triumphant one. I peeked around the corner and saw stacks of cash on the table. My mom said something about a good start, and my dad said we'd have to keep it going. That was the first time something didn't feel right. I couldn't put it into words at the time, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't dying. I wasn't even unwell. But my parents had turned me into a symbol of sickness, and people were paying for it. From that moment on, my life stopped being my own. I wasn't Ryan, the kid who liked building Lego towers and riding his bike too fast down the hill. I was Ryan, the cancer patient, a role I never auditioned for, but one my parents demanded I play perfectly. And the scariest part? I didn't yet know how far they were willing to take it. The first fundraiser was when the act stopped feeling like just a strange family secret and started becoming my reality. It happened on a warm Saturday afternoon in early spring. My parents said we were going to share my story with the community. That sounded harmless enough, but the moment we pulled up to the big community hall, I realized it was something much bigger. Balloons in white and light blue were tied to the entrance. A huge banner stretched across the doorway with my face printed on it, my shaved head, pale skin, and a small, timid smile. Above my picture were the words, "Help Ryan win his battle." I didn't even know I was in a battle. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fresh-baked pastries. Tables were lined with plates of cookies, pies, and cupcakes, all donated by people I'd never met. My parents had me wear an oversized sweater that hung loosely off my shoulders, making me look thinner than I was. Mom dabbed some powder on my face to make me appear paler, and Dad kept reminding me to look tired. When we walked in, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, like a wave, people smiled at me, not the bright, joyful kind of smile, but the soft, sorrowful kind. A woman in her 40s came up and crouched down to my height, telling me I was an inspiration. Her voice trembled like she was trying not to cry. She hugged me gently, as if afraid I might break, then handed my dad a thick white envelope. The day went on in a blur. I was led from table to table, introduced to strangers who already knew my name and my story. People gave cash, checks, even gift cards. They told me to stay strong, that God was with me, that I was a fighter. I didn't feel like a fighter, I felt like an actor who didn't know all his lines. At one point, a little boy around my age came up to me holding a small teddy bear. He said his sister had died of cancer, and that he wanted me to have it for luck. His eyes were big and full of hope. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I wasn't sick, that he should keep the bear for himself, but my parents were right there, smiling at him, thanking him, and I froze. Halfway through the event, my mom went on stage to speak. She told the crowd how much I'd been suffering, how the treatments were expensive, how they needed help to give me a chance to live. Her voice cracked at all the right moments. People reached for tissues. I sat in the front row, my hands gripping the teddy bear so tightly that my knuckles turned white. By the end of the day, we left with boxes of food, stacks of envelopes, and bags filled with things people thought might make me happy. In the car ride home, I expected my parents to be emotional, maybe even grateful. Instead, they were buzzing with excitement, laughing and talking about how well it went and how we should plan the next one soon. That was the night I realized this wasn't about me getting better, it was about them getting richer. And for the first time, I started to wonder if there would ever be a way out of the lie. After the fundraiser, my life stopped feeling like my own. It became a script my parents wrote for me, and I was expected to perform it flawlessly every single day. From the moment I woke up, the act began. If we were going out, I had to shuffle my feet slowly when walking, as if each step took effort. My dad taught me how to fake a cough, deep and rough, just enough to sound real but not too loud to make people suspicious. If someone stopped us in public, I had to touch my chest and sigh, like breathing was hard for me. Inside our house, the transformation was even more unsettling. My room, once full of toys and bright posters, became a sick room. My parents removed most of my games and books and replaced them with empty prescription bottles, medical pamphlets, and a plastic tray with colored water in small cup. The colored water was supposed to look like chemotherapy medication. My nightstand had a box of tissues, a thermometer, and an old oxygen mask that we never actually used but kept in plain sight for photos. Photos were a constant part of my new life. Mom would make me lie in bed under dim lighting while she took pictures from different angles, sometimes with my eyes closed like I was sleeping, sometimes staring weakly at the camera. If she wanted to post an update, she'd have me put on a hospital gown they bought from a thrift store, and Dad would hold his phone like he was taking a picture of me during treatment. I started noticing patterns in how they operated. Every few weeks, there would be a new post online about my condition getting worse, usually paired with a picture of me looking pale and fragile. Within hours, donations would come flooding in. Strangers commented things like, "Praying for you" and "Stay strong," and my parents would reply with heartfelt thank yous. While planning how to spend the money, it wasn't just about looking sick, I had to live sick. That meant no playing outside with friends in case someone saw me running around. No eating candy in public because it didn't fit the image of a weak, fragile cancer patient. Even laughing too much was risky. If we were in public, my mom would give me a sharp look the moment I smiled too wide. School was its own nightmare. My teachers treated me like glass. They excused me from gym class, let me rest in the nurse's office whenever I wanted, and gave me extra time for assignments. At first, it seemed nice, but soon it became suffocating. Kids whispered about me in the hallways. Some avoided me because they thought I was contagious. Others pitied me so much that it hurt to look them in the eye. The worst part was the guilt. Sometimes I would see people online sharing my story, urging others to donate. Some had lost their own family members to cancer. They poured their emotions into words for me, believing they were helping a child in need. And I knew every single one of them was being lied to. At night, lying in bed, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder if there was ever going to be an end to this. My parents seemed to be getting more confident, more comfortable, as the money kept coming in. They didn't just need the donations anymore, they craved them. And I had the sinking feeling that as long as I kept playing my role perfectly, they'd never let me stop. If the first fundraiser was a test run, then the months that followed were the full production. My parents had tasted the power of sympathy, and they weren't about to let it go. It started with social media. At first, they only posted updates on community pages and a few local forums. But then my mom created a dedicated page just for me, or rather, for Ryan's cancer battle. She posted every detail as if my life were a drama series, each update carefully crafted to keep people hooked. The posts always followed a pattern. First came a picture of me looking weaker than before, maybe lying in bed or sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket. Then came a caption about a new complication or a tough week in treatment. She used phrases like "fighting with everything he has" and "his spirit is unbreakable," the kind of words that made people feel like heroes just for donating. But the biggest leap came when they decided to go global. My dad started joining international Facebook groups and online charity boards. He reached out to strangers from other countries, sharing my story along with links to online donation pages. People from thousands of miles away began sending money. Some wrote long messages telling me about their own battles with cancer, or how they lost a loved one and wanted to help me fight mine. It broke something inside me every time I read those messages, because I knew they were pouring their hearts and their savings into a lie. The money came faster than ever. Suddenly, we had a newer car parked in the driveway, and expensive clothes in our closet. My parents said these things were rewards for the stress they were under. They even talked about moving into a bigger house so I could have a more comfortable recovery. I knew that recovery was just another word for more convincing lies. But with the bigger rewards came stricter rules. I wasn't allowed to be seen anywhere that could ruin the illusion. No running around at the park, no swimming, no playing sports. I had to avoid sunlight sometimes, because a tan wouldn't match the image of a chemotherapy patient. If we went out for food, I had to order plain soups or salads in public, no burgers or ice cream. Even at home, they planned my schedule like I was really sick. Fake rest days, fake doctor calls, even fake treatment side effects that I had to act out for visiting relatives or donors who came to see me. My parents coached me on what to say and how to say it. If someone asked about my treatment, I had to describe things I'd never experienced, like the metallic taste after chemo or the dizziness from certain injections. It became a job I never applied for, and there were no breaks. Sometimes my parents would hold late-night planning sessions in the kitchen. I'd hear them whispering about the next fundraiser theme, or which photo got the most donations, or which country's donors were sending the most money. They started experimenting with different emotional angles, sometimes posting about hope, other times posting about emergency needs. It was like they were running a business and I was the product. The scariest part was how good they were getting at it. They could talk to anyone, reporters, charity organizers, church leaders, and make them believe every word. My parents were no longer just lying for money. They were building a whole alternate reality. And I was trapped in the middle, knowing that one wrong move from me could bring it all crashing down. But I had no idea just how far they were willing to push it, until they decided I wouldn't be the only sick child in the family. Up until then, I had been the sole star of my parents' performance. Every lie, every fundraiser, every staged photo revolved around me. But one evening, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach drop. I was in my room, pretending to do homework, when my mom's voice floated down the hall. She was telling my dad that donations were starting to plateau, that people would get tired of my story if it stayed the same. My dad's reply came low and cold: "We need something new." That something new turned out to be my little sister, Emily. Emily was only 7 at the time. She still had that innocence in her voice, the kind that made strangers melt. She was shy, sweet, and had no idea what my parents were about to put her through. They decided she would have a heart condition, a rare one, of course, to make it sound more dramatic. The plan was to run both stories side by side. 2 sick kids in one family meant twice the donations. The day they told her was the day I realized my parents weren't just selfish, they were dangerous. I watched Emily's face twist in confusion when they said she was sick. She kept asking if she was going to die. My mom reassured her in a syrupy voice that it wouldn't happen if people helped. I could see the tears forming in her eyes. The transformation began almost immediately. Emily's hair was left untouched, but Mom bought a small oxygen tank from an online auction to make her look the part. She had to carry it during public events, a plastic tube resting under her nose. They made her wear oversized sweaters too, so she looked frail. Sometimes they even told her to sit in a stroller when we went out, claiming she got too tired to walk. But Emily wasn't like me. She wasn't good at hiding her feelings. At the first fundraiser featuring both of us, she clung to my hand the whole time, whispering that she didn't like it when people looked at her that way. I tried to comfort her, but how could I when I was drowning in the same nightmare? One afternoon, during a small charity event at a church, a volunteer knelt down and asked Emily how she was feeling. Emily glanced nervously at our parents and then blurted out, "I'm not sick. We're just pretending." Time froze. I swear my heart stopped beating for a second. The woman gave a small, confused smile, as if she thought Emily was playing some kind of make-believe game. My dad quickly laughed it off, saying kids have wild imaginations. The volunteer seemed to accept it, but I could see the tightness in my mom's jaw. That night, Emily cried herself to sleep. I sat on the floor by her bed, stroking her hair, feeling the weight of the secret crushing both of us. It wasn't just about pretending anymore, it was about surviving in a home where telling the truth was the most dangerous thing we could do. Every new lie added another stone to the pile I carried inside. I could barely look at the people who donated anymore. Their kindness felt like acid on my skin. They weren't just giving money, they were giving us trust, hope, and compassion. And we were burning it all to keep the scam alive. What I didn't know then was that cracks were already forming in our parents' perfect story. And soon, someone outside the family would notice them. It's strange how lies can feel indestructible at first, like a wall you can't see over. But once a single crack appears, you start noticing all the others you missed before. For years, my parents had been perfecting their act. They knew exactly how to speak to strangers, exactly how to pose us for photos, exactly what kind of language would open wallet. But Emily's slip at that church event had planted something dangerous, doubt. It wasn't immediate. People still donated, still sent messages, still showed up to support us. But I started catching moments when someone's smile seemed just a little too tight, or their questions a little too probing. A few times, at community events, people would ask about specific details from past updates, details my parents had clearly made up on the spot months earlier. I'd see that flicker in my mom's eyes, like she was scrambling to remember what she'd said before. Emily, meanwhile, was struggling more than I was. She hated being the center of attention. She couldn't fake weakness as easily, couldn't remember all the medical jargon our parents fed us. Sometimes she'd forget to limp or get tired when she was supposed to. Other times, she'd look too healthy, running around in the backyard when neighbors could see. One afternoon, my parents came home from a meeting with a local charity looking angrier than I'd ever seen them. Apparently, one of the board members had asked for copies of our medical bills before approving another large donation. Mom tried to laugh it off at home, saying they'd find a way to provide something convincing, but I could see the way Dad's hands clenched around his coffee mug. The real turning point came at a large fundraising dinner. It was one of those fancy events in a hotel ballroom, with round tables, dim lighting, and a stage for speeches. We'd been doing this for years by then, so I was used to the routine: sit quietly, look tired, let my parents do the talking. But that night, something felt off. While my dad was at the podium, giving one of his dramatic speeches about our daily struggles, I noticed a man sitting at one of the front tables. He wasn't eating, wasn't clapping, just watching me. His gaze wasn't pitying, it was sharp, almost investigative. And every time I shifted in my seat, I could feel his eyes following me. After the speeches, guests mingled, and I tried to keep close to Emily. That's when the man approached. He smiled, but there was something in it that wasn't warmth. He said he'd been following our story online and noticed something unusual. He mentioned the medical reports my parents had posted, said they looked almost identical to some he'd seen from a free online template. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the noise of the room. Then, without another word, he slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand and walked away. Inside was a phone number and a note: "If you ever need help, call me." I kept that paper hidden in my wallet, terrified my parents would find it. I didn't know who he was or what he could do, but for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost completely, the tiniest spark of a way out. And yet, I wasn't ready to make the call. Not yet. Because my parents still had bigger plans, and I had no idea that the most public, dangerous stunt was just around the corner. 4 weeks after that fundraising dinner, I carried the folded piece of paper in my wallet like it was a living thing. Every time I opened it, I half expected the numbers to have disappeared, as if they were never real. I didn't tell Emily about it. She was already overwhelmed and scared. I didn't want to put more on her. Instead, I kept it hidden, feeling both comforted and terrified by its presence. Comforted because maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who could help us. Terrified because if my parents found it, they would know I was thinking about betraying them. The man's words kept replaying in my head. How could he have known about the fake reports? Had he been watching us for long? And if he knew, did other people suspect too? Life at home went on as usual, which meant more lies, more staged photos, more forced performances in public. But now I couldn't stop scanning the faces in every crowd, wondering if someone else could see through the act. Then, one Saturday morning, it happened again. We were at a small farmer's market. My parents said it would be good exposure, because a lot of local families went there. I was wearing a hoodie and sitting on a folding chair, while Emily stayed close to Mom. My dad was at a nearby booth talking to someone about our latest hospital visit, when I felt a shadow fall over me. It was him. The man from the fundraising dinner. He didn't smile this time. He crouched down to my level, his eyes steady but not unkind. In a low voice, he told me his name was Daniel. He said he worked with a group of investigative journalists who exposed charity fraud. My pulse jumped at the word fraud. He didn't accuse me. He didn't call me a liar. Instead, he said something that stuck in my head for days. Sometimes, the people who are forced to play along are the ones who want the truth the most. Before I could respond, my mom's voice cut through the air, calling my name. Daniel stood up, slipped another note into my hoodie pocket, and walked away as if nothing had happened. When I checked later, the note had more than just a number. It had an address and the words, "We can help you and your sister." I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't even know if I should. But the fact that he had mentioned Emily, that told me he'd been watching more closely than I thought. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sound of my parents laughing in the kitchen drifting down the hallway. I imagined walking out of the house, finding that address, and never coming back. But I also imagined my parents' faces if they found out I'd spoken to him, the cold fury, the punishment, the way they'd twist the story until I was the bad guy. For now, the note stayed hidden. But I knew in my gut that Daniel wouldn't disappear. People like him didn't just walk away from something like this. And deep down, I didn't want him to. Because even though I was too scared to admit it out loud, a part of me was starting to want the truth to come out, no matter what it cost. For years, I had been able to keep my head down, follow the script, and survive inside the lie my parents built. But there's a limit to how much you can pretend before something inside you snaps. That moment came the day my parents told me I'd be going on live television. We'd done plenty of interviews before, local radio, small-town newspapers, community bulletins. But this was different. A major news network had reached out after one of my mom's posts went viral. They wanted to feature our inspiring family story on a morning show broadcast to millions. My parents were thrilled. They saw it as the ultimate jackpot, bigger audience, bigger sympathy, bigger donations. I didn't share their excitement. The thought of sitting in front of bright lights, cameras, and an audience I couldn't see made my stomach twist. There was no editing, no retakes, every word I said would be live. And deep down, I knew I couldn't keep the mask on that long. The day came faster than I wanted. They dressed me in a faded sweatshirt to make me look weaker, dabbed extra powder on my face, and told me to keep my voice soft and tired. Emily wasn't part of this segment, so she stayed home with a neighbor. Before we left, my mom bent down and whispered in my ear, "Don't mess this up, Ryan. This is important for all of us." The studio was cold, almost uncomfortably so. The smell of makeup and fresh coffee filled the air. A smiling producer handed me a microphone, telling me I was going to do great. I kept my eyes down, clutching the teddy bear that had been given to me years ago by that little boy who'd lost his sister. When the cameras went live, the host leaned toward me, asking how I managed to stay so brave despite everything I was going through. And that's when it happened. My mind went blank. My throat closed up. I could feel my parents' eyes on me from the side of the set, willing me to speak, but all I could hear was the thundering of my heartbeat in my ears. I thought about the people watching, parents who had lost children, patients still fighting, strangers who had believed in me for years. I thought about Emily, curled up at home, scared of the next event. I thought about Daniel and his words about people who wanted the truth. I couldn't do it. Not this time. Instead of answering, I lowered my head and stayed silent. The host tried to fill the space, asking my parents to share instead, and they launched into their rehearsed lines, covering for me. But I could see the tension in their smiles, the faint flicker of panic. When we got home, the air was thick and sharp. My dad slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. My mom's voice was low but laced with fury. She told me I'd embarrassed them, that I'd made people doubt the story. I wanted to tell her it wasn't a story, it was a lie. But the words stayed locked inside my chest. Later that night, Emily crept into my room, her eyes red from crying. She said she wished it could all stop. She said she didn't care about the money, the gifts, the attention, she just wanted to be normal again. And that's when I knew I had reached my limit. I couldn't keep living inside this lie. And if it meant calling Daniel, exposing everything, and watching my parents' world crumble, then so be it. The day after the television interview, the house felt like a pressure cooker. Every sound, the creak of a chair, the slam of a cupboard, carried more weight than it should have. My parents barely spoke to me except for short, clipped commands. Emily kept to her room, and I could hear her soft humming through the wall, a nervous habit she had when she was scared. That night, when the house was quiet and my parents' voices had faded into the background of the TV in the living room, I took out the note Daniel had given me. It was slightly crumpled from being hidden for so long, the ink a little faded. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. The call connected after 2 rings. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "I've been waiting for this." We arranged to meet the next day at a small park on the other side of town. I told Emily where I was going, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. She didn't say much, she just nodded, as if she knew there was no turning back. When I got to the park, Daniel was already there, sitting on a bench with a plain backpack at his feet. He spoke calmly, asking me to tell him everything from the beginning. I told him about the fake diagnosis, the staged photos, the donations, the international campaigns, all of it. I even described the small details, like the colored water in pill bottles, the thrift store hospital gown, the oxygen tank Emily was forced to carry. He listened without interrupting, but I could see his jaw tightening the more I spoke. When I was done, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder, thick, with documents, screenshots, bank records. He told me his team had been gathering evidence for months. They already had enough to prove everything. All they needed now was my cooperation. Over the next 2 weeks, I secretly met with Daniel and his team 3 times. They recorded my statements, collected old photos, and traced the money from donations straight into my parents' personal account. Each meeting made my chest feel lighter and heavier at the same time, lighter because the truth was finally moving forward, heavier because I knew the storm it would unleash. The day the news broke, it was everywhere. Headlines splashed across the internet. Family caught in fake cancer donation scheme. News anchors spoke our names like we were criminals. Photos of me, pale and in hospital gowns, appeared on screen, but now the captions told the real story. That afternoon, I heard the wail of sirens before I saw the flashing lights. Police cars pulled up to the house, officers stepping out with grim faces. My parents were handcuffed right there on the front lawn, neighbors gathering to watch. Some of those neighbors had given us money. Some had prayed for us. Now they looked at us with a mix of shock, anger, and betrayal. Emily stood beside me, clutching my arm. Her voice was barely a whisper when she asked if it was over. I told her yes, even though part of me knew that the fallout was just beginning. Because once you've lived a lie for that long, the truth doesn't set you free all at once, it comes with its own kind of prison. The night my parents were arrested, Emily and I didn't sleep. We sat on my bed, the glow from the streetlights casting thin stripes across the room. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again, but inside me, there was a noise I couldn't silence, a mix of relief, fear, and an ache so deep it felt like it had been there my whole life. The next morning, a social worker came to the house. She had kind eyes, but her voice carried that practiced softness that told me she'd had conversations like this many times before. She said Emily and I couldn't stay there anymore. We'd be living with relatives, people we hadn't seen in years, while the investigation continued. Leaving the house wasn't hard. It never felt like home anyway. But walking past the empty photo frames, the drawers stuffed with receipts from all the donations, the props of our fake illnesses, that was harder. It was like walking through a museum of lies, each item a reminder of how much of my childhood had been stolen. Living with our relatives was strange. They were kind, but we were quiet. Emily didn't talk much for the first few weeks. I tried to act normal, but normal felt foreign, like a language I hadn't spoken in years. School was a fresh start, yet every time someone asked about my family, I felt my throat tighten. What was I supposed to say? The story didn't disappear. It stayed online, shared and reshared. Sometimes I'd see people in the street glance at me, then whisper to the person next to them. I wasn't the sick kid anymore, I was the kid whose parents faked everything. That label stuck harder than I expected. The court process dragged on for months. I didn't attend most of it, but I heard enough to know my parents faced years in prison. Part of me felt sorry for them, they were still my parents after all, but a bigger part of me knew they'd chosen greed over us. That wasn't something prison time could fix. Daniel stayed in touch. He said Emily and I had done the right thing, that we'd stopped other families from falling victim to the same scam. I wanted to believe him. Sometimes I did. Other times, I'd lie awake wondering how different things might have been if my parents had just been parents. Now, years later, I'm still learning how to be myself without the act. I'm not the frail, dying child strangers prayed for, and I'm not the silent accomplice my parents needed me to be. I'm just me. And that's harder to figure out than I thought. Emily's doing better now. She laughs more, plays more. But there's still a shadow in her eyes when certain topics come up. We don't talk much about those years, not because we've forgotten, but because some wounds are quieter when left alone. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that kindness is sacred. People gave us their time, money, and love without asking for anything in return. My parents turned that into a business, but I won't. I can't. I tell my story now, not to gain sympathy, but to make sure people know that scams like this exist, and that sometimes the victims aren't just the donors. Sometimes they're the kids caught in the middle, forced to live a lie they never asked for. And maybe, just maybe, telling it will help me finally step out from under that shadow for good. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you.